PTV, oberoende, piratistisk media, skapad och finansierad av tittarna.
Hello everyone and welcome to yet another episode of PTV International. And today I'm just gonna hand everything over pretty fast, I think, to Cadet Blue here in the background, who's with us as normal, because we have a bit of a special episode.
Yeah, hi. We're here again featuring the very broken display.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Streamlabs.
Thank you, Streamlabs. Yeah. Have my energy. Please fix it soon. Anyway, as we have been teasing and trying to hype you up for the past month or so, promising every time to soon have this mysterious Icelandic guest. And after a couple postponements and just like the general death and lethargy of the summer, we have managed to carry that out. So we're here today with Octavia Rund Youngsdotter. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Yeah, nice. Who is an Icelandic pirate, who I believe has been involved for a fair amount of time now in the party there, and if I recall correctly, has even been a substitute MP at one point.
I am
currently. Oh,
a
cool.
deputy MP, yeah.
Great. And yeah, and they are also many things besides the pirate involvements, I'm sure, but maybe we should move on to let them introduce themselves in their own words. So welcome, Octavia. Very glad to have you here.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very honored and happy to join you. I think it's a fantastic initiative, and as a former chairperson of the European Pirate Party, I know sometimes that we get too busy in our own country, in our own regions, to actually reach out and contact each other and have opportunities like this. So thank you very much for inviting me. As you correctly said, I've been a deputy MP, so I deputize for a member of parliament, and I've done so since 2016, which is, it's hard to describe it other than sort of when the president's away, the vice president kind of gets to come and play politics. And so in the same way, when a member of parliament is away, either on business related to parliament, is out on vacation or leave, or take sick leave for some reason, the deputy member of parliament then comes in as a substitute. So I have had the privilege of both speaking in parliament in Iceland and taking part there. So that's very exciting. I think I've been a pirate always. I know that sounds weird, but I mean, speaking to many of you who are from the cradle of the pirate movement as we know it today, I think many of us sort of grew up on the internet in the ways that we knew that the sort of antiquated or conservative ways in which our countries were governed was not at all ready for the revolution we were already living, right? So from at least the mid-90s, I want to say that I've been at the cusp of what today is normalized as pirate politics. I've been really fortunate. So I moved back, I became active probably in Icelandic pirate politics around 2014-15. And I moved back to Iceland and ran for parliament in 2016. So not that long, but for us, very long. Since we are 9 years, we're not quite there yet with Sweden. So 6 years behind. But I've held many different positions, if you like, within the movement. One thing perhaps about the Icelandic pirate movement is that it is only one of three that have a flat structure. So most of the pirate parties in Europe have some sort of hierarchical building within the organizational form of it, but ours is completely flat in the sense that we don't even have a party leader, which is difficult in an environment that inherently has hierarchy. So I think that's something that both media and politics has done a fair share of using against us. So who's in charge now at the Pirates? Who can we even talk to? Who's in charge? Who knows anything? Who can even speak on behalf of the movement? So in this flat structure, I've held many different positions, and I've happily done so. I've sat on the executive council. I've also been the chairperson of the feminist pirates in Iceland. As I mentioned, I deputized for an MP. I've also been a political advisor when the Pirates had 10 MPs in 2016. I started as a political advisor, helping us see if we could form a government around the Icelandic Independence Party. So that was really exciting. That was right after the Panama Papers, if you recall, where Iceland was heavily represented. And that's not good representation. That's the bad type of representation.
You need to make that clear, yeah. Let's be sure that you get this.
Representation is often positive. In this case, it is absolutely not. And further, I've...
always something very dramatic with you, it seems. It's like a banking crisis, or it's a volcano blowing up, or like, I don't know, child abuse scandals, or whatever else. It's
never easy. I think when you live on a rock that never should have been inhabited by people, and you do so for 1100 years, and that rock is continuing to try and murder you with earthquakes, with volcanoes, with, weather in general, I think you get to a point where it sits in the DNA. And so, yes, things are often very explosive here.
Well, technically, you're kind of letting the rock bully you about that. I mean, didn't you find gold or oil or whatever that you decided not to dig up? I mean, when you can strike back at a rock, shouldn't you?
Geothermal energy eventually, but that took a while probably.
It did, but I think I've worked a lot abroad, and I sometimes compare us to Lebanon in the sense that, we have this inferiority complex because there's so few of us, yet we're absolutely megalomaniacs and think we do everything absolutely best in the universe and in the world. And you'd be amazed at how many people are world famous in Iceland. So the world hasn't necessarily any knowledge of it. But yeah, things tend to be quite explosive. I think, Iceland also, in comparison with the rest of Europe and the pirate parties in Europe, have been quite different. Both the way that we've handled things, we've also not always been in agreement. We pulled out of the Pirate Parties International, for instance. We've been very active, particularly since 2017, in the PPU, and we've held positions within that body. And we, we're not a member of the European Union, although we are a member of the European Economic Area. So I think it's a great way for us to have influence on something that influences our everyday life, and doing it through bodies such as the PPU, the Pirate Parties Europe, is an absolutely delight for Iceland, and I think we should be doing even more of that. But yes, Icelandic politics tend to be quite explosive. We do have scandals. I think scandals are inherent to politics. I think it boils down to what type of culture you have, and what type of mentality the people that do fight for rights or fight for the bettering of the society that they live in, what type of, not just DNA, but what type of action they take to. And so things do become explosive. We're also a very small society, so we're very codependent on each other and have been.
Yes.
And with codependence comes a lot of bad habits. Now, I call them habits not because they're necessarily habits like, oh, I pick my nose and that's really bad. Habits such as, I'm going to let the pedophile in the village, we become utilitarian is what I'm saying. So that means that, the baker is a pedophile, but we do actually have two fishmongers. So we're just going to let one fishmonger go because we're going to need a baker. And so that sort of mentality, unfortunately, is something that we still struggle with in Iceland. We're very overbearing because for the better part of 800 years, having a good relationship with your neighbor meant that you would survive.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, nature here is quite explosive, and like the nature, people are as well. So that this gives us, I mean, that's why I think any connection, any collaboration, any type of tie we have to the outside world is good. It exposes the corruption that happens here. It exposes the way in which we can actually, as a small nation state, have an impact and do better. And by doing that, maybe even leading some change that should take a lot shorter than what we're seeing. We are getting a lot of pushback, I think, in terms of not just fascism on the rise, but also the way in which we word things like disinformation and fake news. I'm of a generation that calls propaganda propaganda. It doesn't have to necessarily be coded up in new words for me to understand what it is. And so the propaganda, as it were, for political power, for me, signifies the fact that I think the majority of people living in representative democracies no longer have good use for representative democracies. And we need to look elsewhere in different ways of doing that, whether that's liquid democracy, direct democracy, or other ways of governing. I think we need to be very careful about, representative democracy is not too big to fail, I guess is what I'm saying. And so...
Yeah, absolutely. That's, yeah. We're already moving into the kind of the other topics we had in mind from the introductions pretty rapidly. So a question we had in mind is just like where we kind of, I guess, started this is the brief history of the Icelandic Pirate Party so far. So around 10 years by now, or 10 years soon. And I guess what would be relevant or could be relevant is how the Pirate Party was established in Iceland, and sort of a short run through of what's happened since.
We have a question from the chat as well. Is there an actual Icelandic pirate party, or are they simply pirates, so to speak? So how big is the Icelandic pirate party today?
In terms of membership, in terms of representation in what we would like to call official governmental bodies, we have 6 members of parliament. We sit on several boards of nationally owned infrastructural companies. We have 2 people in the representation of the city council of Reykjavik, and we have another person who sits in the council of Kópavogur, which probably no one knows, but that's in the outskirts of Reykjavik. In terms of member base, I think we've fluctuated quite a bit, and I think at this point we're about 4,000 now. For a country not larger than Iceland, or a population not larger than Iceland, I think that's a fair size. Out of those 4,000, I guess the golden question is always how many are active, and that's really interesting and something that pirate movements, I think across the board, tend to struggle with, and that's we don't have that much activity. I would say maybe 400 to 500 people, maybe 600 people. Coming in waves, of course, for elections, which, we for a while had a lot of, that around maybe 500-600 people are what we would call active on a weekly basis. So it's not a bad number, but it's not the numbers that we'd like to see. And we're pirates. I don't know of. I know of a couple of individuals that do mount other people's boats and take stuff, but I think they know each other. So
no. What he's asking about is probably like in Sweden. I mean, we're pirates, but we don't really have a say in anything.
I see.
So that's why. But just to concretize the question before I leave over to Maya again, how many percentage did the pirate get in the last election?
Elections for.
Parliament.
It may be good to clarify, because Reykjavik, I think, is super important, right? Because it's like it's one big city. Maybe just geographically a little bit background there, probably.
I believe at this point, 3/5 or 2/3 of the country almost live in the capital area, which is Reykjavik. So the majority of people live in the southwest corner. So about, I think, 150, 160,000 live down here. So I think that's 2/5, something like that, of the total population. We got a total of 6 MPs, about 13%. We have been solid. There was an anomaly, and maybe coming back to Maya's question, in terms of the history, we had an anomaly following the Panama Papers, where 40% of Icelanders asked said that they would vote pirate in the next elections. 40% is huge. But I guess, and I don't want to talk on behalf of the entirety of the continent, but people tend to vote pirate when they are disempowered, when they are not happy about the current way in which things are being handled. Anarchists tend to vote pirate. And by that, I mean people that in many ways think that the existing system is absolutely broken, but they would rather have someone such as a pirate in a broken system trying to dismantle it as best as possible or minimize it than not vote, right? Not all anarchists are nihilists. I think coming back to how we started, the pirate parties have had, from the Pirate Party in Iceland, has had a solid 11 to 13% following. I think we will, unless we really do something terrible, I think that's the following that we will have. That's the stable following of people. So 1 in 10 Icelanders do believe that we're not just doing a good job, but that we could, in fact, have a good effect or a good way in which we come into politics and raise questions. Some of those folks vote for us because we're technocrats. Some of them vote for us because they're just tired of everything, and so this is the least bad alternative. But the majority of people that vote pirate in Iceland actually do believe that the way in which we conduct ourselves in our grassroots work, the accessibility that people have to both representatives but also forming policies, is something that they like to see more of. So coming back to how the Pirates in Iceland were founded, some of the people either watching or listening may know of the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative. Now, that was an initiative that went through unanimously through the Icelandic, it was a resolution that was adopted unanimously by all members of parliament many, many years ago. Unfortunately, I believe it's 12 years now, right after the financial crash, where Iceland basically went bankrupt. And what the IMI, as it's called, was trying to create a safe haven for whistleblowers, journalism, and media in Iceland. And so during the period of that NGO surrounding that and the work and the grassroots work after the resolution was passed, they decided there that one of the big ways, and that was with a member of parliament for a political party that no longer exists, called The Movement, was a member of the board of IMI at the time, and you probably heard of her, Birgitta Jónsdóttir. So they decided in one of those meetings that one of the best ways in which this resolution could actually become law, and the best ways to lobby for this type of legal frameworks and reform would be to form a pirate party such as the Swedish Pirate Party in Iceland. And so they held a meeting, and a ton of people showed up, a lot more than they thought. And so the meeting was held downtown Reykjavik. A ton of people showed up. A lot of people were also obviously online, and the Pirate Party was founded in the end of 2012. So we're coming up to 10 years next year. Now, after that, there was elections, and Pirates ran 13 for city council and got 1 representative in. 14 ran for parliament, got 3 in. And then, of course, the Panama Papers happened. And then the mayhem ensued. I don't know how to describe it better. We had elections in 16, we had elections in 17, we had city council elections and municipality elections in 18, and now again we're having parliamentary elections now in September. So we've gone through many things. One of the things I'm proudest of, I think, is the blasphemy law. We managed to get that out. So blasphemy is no longer illegal in Iceland. Alhamdulillah. So that's really good.
I want to stop there by one point which is just, for everyone who may be also new to the pirate movement, when the pirate movement started in Sweden, it was as a reaction as well to Pirate Bay, essentially. I mean, it was a lot regarding the fact that you couldn't download things for free.
We are fundamentally reactionary.
But it's a different reaction. And I mean, I think this is because what you reacted upon was a lack of transparency and obvious corruption. And also corruption that continued to protect itself, if I'm not wrong. It just continued, even to a certain extent, even till today. It was very obvious type of corruption that happened. And I think it shattered a lot of people. They were like, are you serious? Kind of that's the reaction, at least from some friends, like a complete awakening to a reality of corruption that they didn't really understood existed before, which is, because in Sweden still people will be like, you just don't want to, you want to download legally, right? Which you have to fight against, because it's transparency at its core, the importance of transparency upwards. And like you were to anarchy a little bit, the importance of power to be legitimate over the ones it's sitting on top of, and the importance of transparent power.
I think absolutely, but we mustn't forget either that we would at the time in 2012, and I'm assuming before so Iceland literally went through a complete economic collapse in 2008. We took to the streets and demonstrated continuously until we got elections through in 2009 in April, right? So we're not new to demonstrating. In the mid 70s, women demonstrated in Iceland and demanded equal pay and got it. We're not noobs when it comes to demanding our rights, to standing up against what we find to be a misuse of power, or as you say, a lack of transparency or just full-blown corruption. I think particularly after the economic crash of 2008, everyone was super disempowered, and the joke was, the sarcastic joke obviously was, is it still corruption if everyone gets a piece of the cake, right? Because it's known that corruption thrives in clans, and it thrives in a tit for tat. It thrives in the type of lobbyism where you promise things and you get something in return. In Iceland, it particularly thrives in the laws that are being passed with specific exceptions baked into the law for specific companies. And while the commission and the committee meetings in parliament are not open, this will continue. And so I think a big catalyst was the 2008 economic collapse. I think a big catalyst, and we mustn't forget the failure so far of the Icelandic new constitutional process. We had a referendum, and yet we still haven't adopted the new constitution that was made by, crowdsourced and looked through by the people. Not a copy-paste job of the Danish king, Absolutely fantastic. A lot of old Danish men made a constitution for Denmark. Bless their hearts. That's not the constitution nor representation of Icelanders today. So the new constitution is very important, not just to the Pirate Party, but to many others. So yeah, absolutely, very good points. And it's the lack of transparency and blatant corruption that still today sort of guide the fury of the pirate movement. Which, we're 9 years in. We've been represented in the Reykjavik City Council now for 8 years. We've been, of course, Birgitta Jónsdóttir was a part of a different political party prior to co-founding the pirate movement here. But we've had representation in Parliament since 2014. Yes, and so I mean, so we've been there for a while. So you get to not an identity crisis, but you get to the point where you no longer have a voice because you keep shouting, you keep pointing fingers, and you get to a point where you know, the majority or a big chunk is going to say, well, we probably have to just chip away a little bit at the principles we have to get something through. Because the notion is that political parties have to perform and succeed in certain ways, which I call bullshit on that, absolutely. I think there is nothing greater, better, or more beautiful than opposition that includes a pirate party. And that's what you need to do, Sweden. You need to get yourself into that opposition. Because what we do best is not necessarily lead in the traditional sense, but leading by thought. It doesn't matter who ultimately signs the law or who claims it, as long as it was written and codified and looked through by pirates, and it's based on pirate principles. And I think that's what makes maybe the Icelandic pirate movement different, is the fact that we absolutely understand that there is no left or right in politics. You know, there is either stagnation and conservative, or there is the future. Now, if your politics is not future focused, it will only be a part of either the death of Earth, the death of society as we know it, or, you know, a complete collapse of, you know, not just welfare states, but the common sort of set of rules of what we at least as a society can come together around, which is, listen, if you kill someone, that's really not great for any of us. You're going to need some sort of rehabilitation. And while you do that, you kind of sort of have to be in this house over here. You know, sorry about that, but them are the rules. So I think it's very important that we stop talking about politics in antiquated terms as left or right. The polarization is in many, it's hidden in many different forms.
Yeah,
so
if we talk left or right, we should be defining our terms at the very least, because that's maybe more so the problem than those labels still being in use. Like, even just including like the, you know, the second axis of the famous political compass would like usually improve the quality of the discussion a lot.
It does. But if you look through, we recently passed our election sort of manifesto, and if you look at most of the, I think by now,
will it be available in English at any point?
If not, I will make it my personal goal to have that translated by early next week.
Wonderful.
It would be great to have a look at it.
In Polish, yeah. That what I wanted to say is just, if you look over our policies in general, you know, yes, our policies when it comes to healthcare looks sort of leftish. Our policy when it comes to free expression looks sort of rightish. But I think most of it, when you look through it, and this is why people use the opportunity to confuse voters, is it's not traditional because it's not supposed to be. There is no traditional answer to any of the challenges that we face today. There is absolutely nothing left or right about climate change. Absolutely nothing. And anyone that tries to make a right-winged climate change policy is not making climate change policy. I don't know if that's clear, but then they're making the policy of big corps. That's not for climate change, right? So I think thinking about it more in terms of realistically addressing the challenges, which is what the Swedish pirates did.
Yeah, the way I'd personally put it maybe is that both the traditional left and right are attached to certain ideas about how societies, or more often the economy, should be run, that are kind of in direct opposition with any serious efforts or solutions for the climate crisis or the various other ecological crises we are facing. This is something, this whole like left-right debate is, and like the question of terminology is it's very close to my heart. I keep having these discussions, and I I'm still hoping to have these discussions with many people in my country and our party, and also the Pirate Party at large, and on a European or hopefully global level at some point. But there are several interesting points we have gone through. I unfortunately didn't take notes, but like at least the constitutional reform, that's a story to itself. I know some bits and pieces about it, and particularly the fact that you actually got together, crowdsourced a new constitution, and there were at least like, I believe the Pirates and maybe some other newer movements or parties kind of got like a boost out of advocating for accepting or like getting this constitution into force. And yet, like 10 years later, almost 10 years later, it's still not there. So that's something we could go into. That's something I'm interested in, and I believe is interesting for many who are for the sake of understanding how these like democratic initiatives or deliberative initiatives like live or die eventually. And yeah, I'm trying to recall the other points I tried to put aside for this. Then the sort of the split between pirate parties that have had electoral success and the other ones is pretty stark often, and we are possibly kind of hearing it here in your descriptions of how the game changes, or what the game is like for you as a parliamentary party, as opposed to most of the pirate parties so far in Europe and the world. And finally, there was something.
Yeah, I have it.
There was something, but yeah, those.
Sure, we can start with those two.
Yeah, but there was we can get to these, but I had like one thing for this sort of laying out the basics, or laying out the landscape for us and the chat, and that was like what's going on right now, what's going on in Iceland, how's probably the virus, but besides that, if there's anything going on besides that, maybe if there's something interesting that's come out of it, has it like changed the discussion, has it brought something new to the forefront, or is it just all the same but with the virus, or is it and yeah, just the political atmosphere, and maybe if possible briefly the general political field, just to because this is an election year for you, so it would be nice to have this context before we move on. We can move on to all these interesting topics that we touched on after we get through that.
Some comments from the chat should be that if you ever were to run in Sweden, Octavia, I think you'd have a fan base ready.
Yeah, there's a lot of applause, and this is what the Swedish Pirate Party needs, not Renee. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you, Maya, for curating that. And again, please let me know if there are more questions from the chat. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I'm very passionate about the changes we actually can make in the world, because it's so brief, the time we have here. And all of a sudden, we're in our 80s and we have to blend everything. And so to eat and we're in an old people's home. So I want to make sure that I don't hog too much time with my long speeches, and that the people in the chat also have a chance to ask questions. Were there any questions just from the chat now that we could take, or because if not,
actually, so far we only had a couple of repeats, of which I believe Kringlan or Otto already answered in the chat. So
Okay.
We get a lot of repeats. People are tuning in. They might like ask, what is this all about, and like how big is the pirate party in Iceland? Like this stuff we already went through. So we're not going to like bother you with them when you're going on about something.
Thank you. And just in terms of terminology, I think it's just very important to remember, because yes, Iceland does have a parliamentary representation and council and municipality representation, but we also have a grassroots movement. And I think what I've talked about before, which is very important, is that pirates are a specific type of individual. At least so far, I would say that there are some traits that I find in every pirate, and so we can spend, if you imagine a tree, like a beautiful tree, like in Sweden where you actually have real trees, not like the trees in Iceland. You know, the pirates, regardless of where they're from, where in the world they are, will spend an eternity discussing and talking about every single leaf and the form of the leaf and the type of leaf and the photosynthesis and how that works and how many leaves are on what branch and why the branches did go out in a certain way. And we get lost in that. We often get lost in terminology, or we get lost in conversations at such a deep level that we forget that what people are asking is, what type of tree trunk are you? Right? So if you imagine this huge tree with all these leaves and all these branches and extra branches, they're asking about the root system of that tree. They just want to know what type of tree it is. And before you know it, someone's completely flabbergasted, you know, by someone talking about pirate politics in the streets before an election, talking about these tiny leaves. So I think perhaps the fact that Iceland is quite homogenic, a country, I think that many of the pirates, I mean, we were a reactionary and definitely a movement that was created at the cusp, or on the edge of, you know, this whole revolutionary, it's enough, like the Basta Ya movements, you know, it's no more. And so I think that is partly our success. Also, it's very important in politics. It doesn't matter. Of course, be courteous and be polite, but be always firm in principle, always firm in your principles. The thing is, it's when you waver or when you become flexible in your principles that people find that they can't really trust you with representing them in government. It's not because you're firm in principle. Be flexible in implementation if you have to, but not in your principle. You're all right. I mean, I feel like hugging I know it's COVID and everything, but I feel like hugging every pirate that's running for any office and just going, you are a fantastic human being. You have the exact, you know, it doesn't matter whether people agree with you or not. You have something that you believe in. You have a passion. You have something that you want to change, you know, whether it's copyright, whether it's, you know, how you know, internet security is governed in government, you know, whether it's what kind of cert you want to set up, what kind of, you know, whatever it is, your field of expertise or passion, you're going to do all right if you just keep believing that you are all right, right? So it's also just the thing about not wavering, you know, it's like, it's not a time now to go to sleep, and it's not a time now to sort of be like, well, somebody else probably has this point. The other parties don't. I will guarantee you. Left green, right green, conservatives, independent parties, so-called social democrats, the unsocial democrats, whatever, you know, all of these, they don't have the way of viewing the world that we do. And they're petrified of the internet. Petrified of it. And so I think it's very important that every single person in Sweden, in Finland, Norway, Germany, wherever the listeners or viewers are, that you remember that it doesn't matter if the opposition thinks that you're wrong. Stand by who you are, and people will elect you. I will guarantee it. And don't be reactionary to other, you know, party politics. They're going to blah, blah. I think people at the end of the day know that given a chance, most pirate parties, or I would say every pirate party in Europe that I've met, will actually put some of those words to action. Absolutely, given the chance. But you asked about the Constitution.
You actually touched on like kind of if we could briefly set the scene, like what's going on there right now in terms of politics. You kind of touched on like the different parties, other parties besides the pirates in Iceland. So what are the sort of the power relations in the current government, and are those looking to change now?
So we're in year 2 of a global pandemic, and slowly white people in the Western world are realizing that these pandemics are bad, right? I think people in many other continents and regions absolutely know this, and have gone through many others. But now it's here, and so the second wave is now hitting us. Not only is it really bad to have a global pandemic, but none of us are safe until all of us are safe.
Oh, just only the second wave for you guys.
Oh no, this fourth wave of COVID, but the second wave of realization. So the first wave of realization is, wow, global pandemics really suck. Second is, wow, it really is true. I mean, as a queer person, that's, absolutely anarchistic in my way of thinking, absolutely veer to not just left, right, but, forward as well. I think it's very important to remember that none of us are safe until all of us are safe. And Absolutely. This pandemic has been a really, really good reminder of that, but it's also been a complete shock. Now, I think in Iceland, like many other places in the world, what happens in a pandemic or any type of large-scale issue or problem that faces the entire country, you become conservative. Now, to those maybe listening that don't really know the Icelandic context, we had our first identified case at the end of February 2020. And what followed was, of course, waves of a pandemic and people died, etc. We did tackle things very differently from Sweden, for instance. But we had some add-ons that kind of complicated things a little bit. We had about 50,000 earthquakes over a period of 5 or 6 weeks, followed by a volcanic eruption that continues. And it keeps slowing down a little bit, and people are like, that's it. And then it just fires up again. So we've had an active volcanic eruption now for 4.5, almost since March. And
That's
this
nice, like the apocalyptic imagery for our times.
There's been beautiful photos from that I think everyone has seen.
Eruption on the screen in like a fake fireplace, and like sip on that tea.
I know, it looks beautiful. The thing is, though, when you're living in really uncertain times and you have a country that is used to, I think Iceland has perhaps, we're very fortunate. I mean, we have a ton of immigrants. We have more than 20,000 people from Poland, 20,000 people that have taken part in building up the society, building up our tourism industry. Absolutely fantastic people from Lithuania, Albania. We have people from all over the world, really, from Vietnam, from Thailand. And I think it's very important. And the Icelandic Pirate Party is hoping for 1 million Icelanders, I think, by 2050. It's a stretch. Wow. 370,000 today. But I mean, we do have the room, and I do believe we not just have an obligation, but it would be so much more fun if everyone came over and we stopped throwing out people that are pregnant or with toddlers, or Dublin rule, regulation stuff. But yeah, it's absolutely terrifying. That's been a big part of also now what we're looking at in terms of the political scene before the elections. But primarily, the waves of other natural disasters have been tougher than, yes, there is a village, but it's 4-5 kilometers away from the volcanic eruption. The volcanic eruption is a fissure, which means that it goes quite slow. So it's not like people would have to flee their houses in the middle of the night. I think what we're talking about more is, more than a year into a global pandemic where the uncertainty has been, detrimental to well-being and health in Iceland. We get all of these earthquakes, and they're quite large, many of them, and they shaky a lot. you know, and that ends up with a volcanic eruption. And it's not so much the eruption as the gases and everything else that follows. And I think people forget that, because when you're looking at a web camera and it's really beautiful, you're not really thinking that the wind is actually blowing from, you know, the east, which means that all the particles are going to be blowing into, you know, very densely for Iceland populated areas. And so old people, people with asthma, people with any type of lung disease have to stay indoors. I mean, that's also been a part of the scene. And, you know, unfortunately, there was this meteorite thing that happened as well. And so, so that hit down, and then a lot of the ash wasn't coming from, like, anyway, particles are bad for you. Masks are good for you for more reasons than pandemic. So I think...
Do you still have people insisting on not wearing the masks?
Not as much as in other countries. We took the mask mandate away, unfortunately, but it's back on again. But of course, people that do have respiratory diseases, etc., are encouraged to use masks also just because of you know, natural disaster reasons. But you know, we tend to be more conservative in times of crises. We do, and we vote more conservative in times of crises, which for me is a bit of a worry. However, I've seen the current government, which has done a great job of explaining to people how things are not left or right. The current government is a right and left-wing government. The only thing that ties them together is absolute stagnation and conservatism. And so I think that made it easier for me to do the no, not left, right, it's backwards or forwards conversation, because people see it more tangibly in the current government. I think we're probably going to be, I'm hoping, I'm not certain, but I'm hoping we're going to see a different type of government coming in. I would love a minority government. I would love for us to take some chances and to stop the bullyism in Icelandic politics. And so we'll see. We're polling okay. I think currently we're looking at 7 representatives, so 7 MPs, so that's 1 more than before. But we're also looking at a different picture now. So Birgitta Jónsdóttir, one of the founders or co-founders of the Pirate Party in Iceland, has recently joined the Socialist.
I read about that.
Yeah, so she's the Socialist Party of Iceland, I believe they're called.
I've heard. I've mostly heard good things about them. As far like the things I have heard about them
they're
have been
a new
good.
party, and they're a socialist party, and I think they do socialist politics quite well. I myself don't necessarily see myself as a socialist. I'm still more in a too much of an anarchistic streak, I believe. But we also see former members of parliament such as Ásta Guðrún Helgadóttir, who ran in the primaries for the Social Democrats in Iceland. So we're seeing this seeping of personalities, known people, into other parties, and I think that has definitely had an effect on the way in which people are viewing the pirates. On the other hand, we also see folks from other parties joining. So one of the members of parliament voted in for the left Greens that refused to take part in the forming of the government, and who later no longer rescinded the membership of the left Greens, has now joined the pirates, right? And so I think in Iceland there's more leeway for that. I'm not quite sure what that picture looks like in Sweden or Finland, but I think there's a little bit more leeway for that, because people at the end of the day in Iceland very much choose people. We're voting for people more than parties, I think. So I think it's an interesting and exciting time to be alive, for sure. I get to go walk and look at an active volcano whenever I want. I could do without the earthquakes, though, I have to admit. But politically, I think Iceland is sort of, we love to fix things. We love to sort of when everything looks like it's just going to break or everything's just at the cusp of something happening, we love to come sweeping in and save the day. And so I find that elections in Iceland tend to not really start the campaigning until 6 weeks before, really. So I guess in another 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, so it's the calm before the storm right now.
Yeah, it's a little bit of calm before the storm. But I think it's very interesting, and it's very interesting to see how pirates also are renewing themselves. So we have very new and very young people also in the front seats, and I think that's really exciting. We saw some, how do you call them, like old known sort of...
the old guard.
The old guard sort of switching a little bit, with 3 men leaving and will not up for new election, and we have some exciting newcomers coming in. So I think I'm hopeful for that. But most of all, I hope, really hope, and this is in my blackest heart of hearts, that there will be a majority of parties, and we have a lot of new parties that are running now. That the
Have
majority
there been more since the 2017 election? Like besides the socialists?
I think so. Some of them ran for the first time then, but I mean, there's always going to be a couple of parties that come up, and so I'm very happy about that. I think the more the merrier. I think it gives nuance. I don't want my rainbow in one color. I want it in as many colors as I can find it, right? So I think more parties, and that's also something that's interesting. There seems...
We have a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
I think we got through the view towards the election nicely here. So there's a couple of questions in the chat and a lot of nonsense.
Yeah, that's why I probably missed the questions, because nonsense.
Yeah. So one
England,
question:
can
are
you
you guys
please
in
stop
lockdown now?
shitposting?
Are we in lockdown now?
Mm.
No, we're not.
And also, how many earthquakes did you say?
50,000. 50,000.
50,000. Okay.
Yes.
Over.
I think it was
how
6
many
weeks.
months?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Damn.
It was a lot. I biked a lot, because when you bike, you can't feel the earthquakes as much.
Wow.
That sounded like a third
was-
world thing. Yeah, I'm gonna take the bike, because at least then I can feel them as much.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
So yeah, like life pro tips, the Icelandic way. Like, okay. And one more. Do you have verbatim? Do you have racist Jimmy Åkessons in Iceland? Are you familiar enough with Swedish politics to know what they are referring to? Or
I know racists are many different names, so I don't know this particular name, but I know racists. Yeah, it's interesting.
Is Jimmy Åkesson like the Sweden Democrats brand of racist or something else now?
No, it's the same thing.
Okay.
So
So very like garden variety racist.
Nice. Absolutely, we have Nazis in Iceland. We have racists in Iceland. I think what I like is that whenever there's election, the so-called social nationalists or national socialist parties always run, and no one ever votes for them. I think it's extremely important that they continue to run. But yeah, I've had run-in with Nazis here. We have racists that are quite outspoken. We have some of them in parliament even. So right now, the current parliament is, I am hoping, going to be I'm hoping for fewer men, and I'm hoping that the men that get voted in are going to be younger. Because I think the time of old white men in politics it's break time. I honestly feel so. But we do have racists. A lot of the racism in Iceland.
We don't necessarily have much time left as a species, so maybe we can have like the last encore at least.
Exactly. I mean, I think a lot of the racism here.
They can retire to the like yachts or islands or whatever.
There's been a lot of
paradises.
there's been a lot of yes, well, actually. So why not sit down with a pina colada, Prips, or whatever you fancy, and just have a break. I don't know. I think I'm very. I find it tedious. Because the racist conversation is always the same. It's the same strawman. It's the same whataboutism. It's the same sort of. It's the same lies, really. And so those are, if we take refugees, immigrants, or asylum seekers, people that need benefits in Iceland are gonna have less benefits. It's pie. And that's absolutely not true, and that's not how any of this works. It's xenophobia to a large extent. I think what has worried me is the straight up Nazis, because they came from Sweden and Finland to help, like with pamphlets. They had pamphlets.
So
about race.
I'm personally in interesting company since I last flew to Iceland in 2017, I believe, to deliver pamphlets for the Pirate Party.
Yeah.
So apparently I have similar hobbies to local Nazis.
Well, I found it to be very interesting to learn that there were a group of Nazis downtown Reykjavik with pamphlets, with race purity, like actual.
Yeah, they do the same thing here. Like Swedes come over and the local ones go out, even though at least one of the organizations has been like literally banned by the highest court at this point. They still keep showing up in like marketplaces and town squares to give out those pamphlets. It's one of those hard questions of like civic liberties and like the right to assemble and organize.
No, absolutely, and I'm very pro that. I'm not against people handing out flyers. That's not the point of it. I grew up in Denmark, and I grew up next to the house of the leader of the Nazi party in Denmark, and I saw the kids. I saw the young, particularly the young teenage boys, and I saw them coming on the bus, and I saw them 3 weeks later in boots, in a completely different attire. I saw them with a buzz cut. I mean, I know how you radicalize. I've worked in the Middle East. I've worked all over. I know what radicalization looks like. But the thing is, you can only radicalize to the point where people really honestly are in such dire need of whatever it is, nurture, access, credibility, believability. It's for me, it's a huge problem, and I don't believe that it's a problem that only Sweden has to deal with. Swedish Nazis take airplanes. I think it's collectively we have to deal with the fact that somehow we're still dealing with a past that tells young, particularly, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Sweden, but here it's particularly young men, or men that sort of, and they come from broken homes, they come from broken homes. They are forced into education systems that aren't made for, that are gendered, where, small boys have to be strong and small girls have to shut up and look pretty. And none of the education systems are made for actual learning for individuals with different needs, right? And so I'm very cautious about, and don't get me wrong, I have very, very, very clear guidelines and practices when meeting Nazis, personally, and what to do to a Nazi. But we have to stop and consider which part of the society that we are a part of is the, not a breeding ground, because it's not even that, but is helping and facilitating you know, this ideology, fascism.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of this, and I'd like to, Kringman, Otto, are you still there?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm here listening.
Yeah, so we're pretty much through the stuff I wanted to at least get through, and we're a bit over an hour into the stream, so like, if
Are
you've been
you
like
letting
holding
us
back,
in?
feel free to.
Oh my God, you
stop
shouldn't have
holding
done
back.
that.
Uh-oh,
Uh-oh.
are you letting
Now
us in?
Yeah, I'm
The
making.
Chads are here.
I may be
Exactly.
making a huge mistake, but please don't disappoint me.
No, I've
So because we're getting questions about like, how is it in Sweden? So I figure, I mean, I could be answering you for you.
no, I can.
You've been doing that for us for
The- the-
centuries.
I've been a
so-
racist in Sweden for centuries. Ask me, I know everything. That's how it
the
sounded
thing
like.
is that
No, but
if
this
you
is
ask
yeah.
But like
Kringland
this,
and me,
this general topic of like, well, there's radicalization and like how the entire system, the political system and the economic system is basically all of it a breeding ground for this kind of radicalization we see. And many kinds of radicalization, also the brand of radicalization that we arguably represent. So
Yeah, no,
so that's a very recurring theme and topic on this channel in general, not just this segment that we're doing here, but also the Swedish ones.
yeah, we were just. I mean, just earlier today we sat and talking again about immigration
Just one
politics
thing
and so on.
before I let you guys go off. The chat has been running in the background, and there's
Any
one question I'm going to. I'm not sure if I even want to read it out loud, but I mean, it could probably be turned into a couple of interesting topics. This is probably not serious, or hopefully not serious. Does Iceland have access to women for incels? And I mean, we could bridge that over to say
I can bridge that
questions
for
of
you.
like the
answer that question?
sex work laws concerning sex work in Iceland, or the famed pornography ban, which is I believe still in effect there, and
I
how it
have
affects the
something-
internet and so on. That's one possible avenue.
But
And
Maja,
then just a couple of comments from the chat about Swedish racists migrating to Iceland and that being charming. And Island kan få våra nazister och vi kan få Björk och Sigurus i utbyte.
Yes, you can take our Nazi. We get Björk and Sigurus.
Trade of the Nazis and then a couple of.
Not sure that's a fair
Nice.
exchange, but okay.
well, I actually have a question because there is a famous, I don't know if it's a myth, that's the thing. It seems so stupid that. I mean, I have never really believed it, but I've heard it so many times that it's made me question it. Is there some kind of immigration law that allows men to move to Iceland to marry women because somewhere the government is afraid the gene pool is too non-mixed up? Is there any truth to something like that?
I'm sorry, what is this about?
No.
Like, do you want to give a source for this?
If I may, I wouldn't mind addressing that. I'm sure it's been on Snopes for a long time. I don't know where it started. Snopes would know. But no, they're absolutely not. I think, and I'm not even kidding. I think most Icelanders would agree that Iceland would be a nation today without women. It's an extremely hostile environment to live in, and it was an extremely hostile environment to live in, and you know, many of the women that were a founding part of any population here were very, very, let's say, versatile in their strength. No, I'd really like to answer the maybe joke, maybe serious in joke, maybe can I ask this, but I'll pretend it's a joke because then I can actually ask it. No, Iceland does not have a quota of women for incels. I think incels are an actual real problem, and incels to me come down to the same radicalization as fascists. I think there is absolutely something concerning about groups of young individuals, whether they identify as men or not, coming together with the privilege of having ownership over and or access to bodies of anyone else. And I think that's maybe a part of I feel like I'm losing privilege or control in my life. I am owed things. I think the patriarchy has messed all of us up. I am very anti-patriarchy. And anti-patriarchy, of course, we can discuss words forever, but I think we all know it's the systemic issue in our societies, the way in which, you know, these hidden ways in which some people have more privilege and more power than others, right? So without going further into the patriarchy, I think we need to address it. I think we need to address why this is funny. Why is the objectification of women's bodies? I mean, I of course get I'm non-binary, but I sort of get how do you say? I get viewed as a woman often, and that sort of gives people the notion or the idea that they can treat me in a certain way. I always found that profoundly weird, just absolutely profoundly weird. Just like I always found it weird that people go up to any man, literally any man, any person that didn't have, like, let's say, large breasts, and be like, "Can you fix my computer?" And I'd be like, "But I'm literally right here." Like, I don't understand, right? So, and just to follow on that, I think a part of the success of the Icelandic pirates is perhaps this. And I'll be very brief about it because it's getting a little bit serious. Pirate parties everywhere. Every single pirate party I'd known operates and wants to operate in a post-gender world. The Icelandic pirate party has that one difference, that the bulk of it recognizes that we do not live in a post-gender world, and we have to address the imminent issues of today for us to actually be able to achieve the post-gender world. So as we are waiting for post-gender world that we all want to enjoy, absolutely, with the freedoms that comes with it, we have to address the inequalities of today. And so I think understanding that, and understanding that free expression is absolutely fantastic when you also understand the limits that come with it, and there always will be limits. You know, that those two tend to be a good recipe for great politics. But yeah, it's the story about people. I don't even know, because Iceland has pioneered women's rights in many ways.
That's true.
And so why would people think that they could come here? I mean, you're privileged, you're Swedes, you can come here anytime, right? So I think the way to an Icelander's heart, and let me tell all of you this is not just for pirates. Are you listening? Number one, bad puns. Really bad puns. The worse
I'm
the
gonna
pun,
be the king of Iceland.
the more the dad joke, the better. The more the meme with the dog that's like, the better it is. That's one.
Well,
Two,
you can just give me the crown then.
Two, I think we get passionate about people that are passionate, you know. We also get really passionate. We like humor that isn't necessarily based on hating a specific group. Like, if you really have to talk badly about queer people, women, people of color, or any combination of that to be funny, we probably think that you're not that funny. Sorry. But like really daddy pun, like play on words jokes, very good. So really bad jokes that are punny. Anything that has to do with passion, I think we're passionate about people that are passionate. And if you have, I think most of us are always up for an adventure. So if it's like, all right, everyone get on their horses, we're going to ride to Sweden tomorrow. And everyone's like, all right, let's go. without really thinking. We don't have horses. Also, we would need a boat. Also, all these other things. So we're quite, we're adventurous. So those are my 3 tips to get into the hearts.
So, Kingland, when we get our boat, we're now qualified to go to Iceland and get our wives.
You're not getting your wives.
Charm our wives. Sorry, not getting. We get to charm our wives or boyfriends. We don't know.
Exactly.
Still undecided.
Absolutely.
No, but that's there's so many. Actually, I wrote down a lot of things from this that I wanted to circle back to. But actually, it's been really good just to listen for a while and to hear, because I think that it's been a good kind of free form, and I think there's a lot to learn from the pirates out there. Obviously, like you were talking.
One quick question here.
I also
realized I've been on mute for a while, so I may have made some comments which was just lost to either. But do Icelandic people joke about any other Nordic countries? Since this is a very time-honored tradition for most of the continental Nordics. So
yes,
I mean all of the continental Nordics.
Actually, I who's more Nordic than Swedish. The Swedes joke about the Norwegians. The Norwegian jokes about the Swedes and the Finns, and the Danes joke about the Swedes as well. And I think I've heard some Finns joke about the Danes.
As they should.
I think we joke about like just all of the other Nordics. It's mostly this one like joke formula where like a member from a person from this country, that country, and a third country goes somewhere and something happens. That's the bit. Those sometimes happen to be all Nordics, but
I mean,
we actually don't have any specific like classic or like actually good jokes about anything. It's mostly just about Swedes being gay, unfortunately.
Finnish.
That's the most common one.
Yeah,
it's everyone in Sweden is queer.
Yeah, that's
specifically gay, not just queer, but just specifically gay.
No, it's really kind of that type of joke. But you have a very special relationship with Denmark. This is actually one of the things that I wrote down a little bit and talk about. Do you make mostly so is it jokes just would be kind of Danish focused, right?
Du snakker danska?
Ja, jeg taler fuldstændig dansk. Altså, jeg voksede op i Danmark og brugte meget lang tid, og jeg har min skolegang i Danmark. Jeg gik på universitet i Danmark. Og jeg kan fråga på skånska. No, sorry.
No worries.
This is very good. Like, this is the solidarity building exercise that I was hoping this would be.
I really like this, like the Skåne. Like people from Stockholm tend to be, this a little bit like southern Swedish and the accent. I really like it. The fråga, I like it. But I think the between Iceland and Denmark, obviously, I'm going to say Denmark. We have a lot of jokes with Danes, but then we're just like, I don't know. It gets really punny. We do talk about the Finns as brothers, but I think it's because we sort of, if we're the alcoholics of the Nordics, then it's not fun. But if the Icelanders and the Finns are the alcoholics of the Nordics, then it's more fun.
Yeah.
So
solidarity.
Drunk solidarity.
Yeah, I think so.
But and I want to, because a lot of you go to Denmark, right?
Before Kingland, just hold that thought for a second. Because I actually have one of those jokes for an example. Do you guys know what a Finnish traditional soup for the summer is?
No.
It's vodka in a plate with flowers on.
Vodka with a plate. Can you confirm, Cadet?
I've never heard that one in my life.
It's not actually actual soup. It's just it's a joke about.
It's just a bowl of vodka. I don't mind that.
It's about at that level, to be honest. Most of it.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
that is a very, very traditional Swedish jokes about Finnish alcoholism.
Yeah, I think most of us. So obviously, for many of us, we still have the option of learning Danish in school. So many of us seek education and higher education. We're 376,000. if you want to learn, like I have a double master in international development studies and international communications. At the time, back in the late 90s, there was no chance for me to seek university degrees in Iceland. So I think the connection between learning the Danish language, obviously the 500 years of sort of, whether you want to call it like Commonwealth or colonization, I mean, there's a tie between us. And so, yes, we do often go to Denmark. We often go to Denmark to university, but I mean, we go other places as well. And I think there's been a tradition maybe of certain traits going certain places. So I've heard a lot of architects go to Norway and to Denmark. I think half of the Swedish hospitals have Icelanders in specializations. So if you, for instance, want to become any type of surgeon, Sweden is the top choice of Icelanders to go for their specialization, because we think we only offer 3 or 4 specializations as a doctor. So we do look to our northern brethren for many things, but in terms of jokes, I think we really love the Finns because we identify with a lot of it, and I think it's also because we're like Norway and Sweden and of course a little bit Denmark. That's the sort of the Scandinavia, and then there's like the odd cousins, and that's Finland and Iceland, and we're like, hi. We're like the nerdy cousins that get invited to the party on each side, and so. But I think we very much feel a part of a Nordic family in general. But all the puns, most of the puns, not all of them, but most of the puns are about Danes, I have to say.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And there's you said early. Like one of the things that you said about Iceland, and it's obvious, like if you compare to Sweden, obviously Iceland is small. But one of the things that I think is Sweden is incredibly small. And this is one of the problems of Sweden in terms of international things. Like when you talk about Sweden, Swedish people kind of suffer from the sense of kind of grandiosity, you know, like we are the biggest in Scandinavia. The problem is Scandinavia is completely inconsequential, and in most of the cases.
Also, this came up at the very beginning with Octavia, this sense of grandiosity, and I think it's shared between the Nordics. Like we really like to think we're the best it gets on this whole fucking earth, and
I want to say that because it's hard to deal with.
I don't know that I agree with you. I mean, I grew up in Denmark, and I think the law of Jante is a terrible thing. I think in Iceland, you don't have to be ashamed if you're really good at something, right? And I think so in Iceland, we have the inferiority complex paired with megalomania, and that's what makes us sort of strange. You know, in Denmark, if I would walk around and say, listen, I'm the dog's bollocks, I'm really good at this, people are like, wow, bit uppity, aren't you?
I don't think it's the same thing. I want to connect it a little bit to the racism and the issues that we at a very fundamental core seem to have. Because one of the things, I mean, I've been living abroad for so long, and coming back to the Scandinavians, it's just like it's a little bit of a bubble in Sweden, to put it the least. And it's very hard to have the discussion that you're having a little bit, a discussion about the structures, a discussion about the fact that we have a lot of racism going on in this country. And I'm not trying to attack you. Please do not, like, let's watch the structures a little bit so that we can rebuild something like you're talking about. Like, how do we move forward, and how do we kind of have that discussion, partly with boomers, right? But they're gonna move on, but also with our peers, right? Because we haven't done that. Like, we've done great in the eyes of others, and sometimes in the eyes of ourselves. But we have a history and a legacy where we really haven't dealt with a lot of these issues that are coming up to the forefront. If it's the third wave feminism, the trans issues, or immigrants and the racism that is here, like, how do you feel? Like, how is those discussions going in Iceland? And are you like, do you feel like you're kind of getting to the core of the issue, or is it like there has never been any racism here? What are you talking about? Or that sort of stuff.
I think, yeah, I mean, just to comment on that, I think when the first wave of Me Too hit Iceland, we just went through a couple of waves of similar, like on topic, and everyone was really tired, like really super tired. I think the conversation in 2017 with Me Too in Iceland was interesting because I saw a large group of young men really angry. And it's because we never talk about internal and external structures, right? So you had a bunch of women and non-binaries that were very, very vocal about the fact that they had been sexually harassed, sexually abused, that, and we have terrible laws in Iceland in terms of, in terms of the judicial structures in which you can actually, rape cases go through, and there's, it's terrible statistics. And they were, they saw all of these stories and they heard all of these stories, and they were so mad. And I, for the life of me, I couldn't understand where that anger came from. And I realized all of a sudden that they were all taking this extremely personally. They were like, I babysit my kid. Well, first of all, you don't babysit your child. You just babysit other people's children, right? But they're like, I do the laundry. I clean the house. I do everything 50-50 with my partner. And still I have to sit under this scrutiny, and still I have to sit and listen to this. And I think what we learned in Iceland from that was we haven't learned, and I think especially young men in education systems haven't learned that we can have a conversation about systemic wrongs in our systems and it's not personal. I can talk about gender, and I can talk about gender from a point of whatever it is, and it doesn't mean that it's sort of I know a person named Ali who is from Iraq. It doesn't mean that, and who picks his nose. It doesn't mean that every Iraqi picks their nose. It doesn't mean that every man called Ali picks their nose. And it's this generalization. And it's this lack of understanding that we can have a conversation about structures and leave it at that. It doesn't have to be personified, and it's not personal, and that is really difficult because we haven't been taught how. I mean, I've met many Swedish pirates, and I remember having a really difficult conversation that I chose to have, right? I could have said, okay, bye, but I didn't. I chose to have a conversation about the consent law in Sweden back in 2015-16. And this young man really feared that he would never be able to have sex again, because at any given point, at any time, someone could come and say, oh yeah, you raped me 3 years ago. So the concept of consent had simply not seeped in. And I think that is a difficult conversation to have, because I don't know what sexual education looks like in Sweden, but I can tell you we have a lot to work on here. And this whole understanding of bodily autonomy, regardless of, and that you're not owed anything, of privilege, of understanding no doesn't need to be words. You physically also, and the whole thing about consent is super important. And it comes back to this whole thing. I mean,
I want to, point on that because there's certain terms here, and I mean, like again, this is one of the things why, talking about socialism, yeah, sure, with someone who understands socialism, that's fine. But when you're talking about politics, or when you're trying to communicate with someone, it's incredible. There are just certain terms that get people to see red, and I'm sometimes guilty of provoking them because I think it's. Sometimes I can enjoy a little bit of when people.
Why do you do it?
I think it's fundamentally like if we're talking about white fragility, I know that people in the chat are gonna explode. But I'm sorry, that's the term, and you like the fact that you're getting upset about it kind of proves the point. Like, because what you're talking about, again, we need to see the systematic issues, and it's such a hard conversation to have with people, and there's so much information online that just gets them to, the moment someone says critical theory, or critical race theory, even worse, now people are going to explode about that. We had the cultural Marxism come back here, and now political leaders literally posted that Nazi, straight Nazi thing, and we have, the Great Replacement coming back in Sweden again, and all of these things and these terms, and like, it's so hard to have that conversation. It really is.
I mean, arguably, it never went away. It's
maybe
just
this
getting
meant for
mainstream
corners.
now.
Yeah, I mean, what are you doing to provide safer spaces for people to do that? Because, I mean, coming back to some of the questions from prior, I am an avid, very, very vocal advocate for sex workers' rights in Iceland, and that, I mean, I want to have absolute sex workers' rights completely. I think sex work should not be legal. I think the Swedish model, which is not a Nordic model, by the way, the Swedish model is has been proven not to work. I think if you want to talk about poverty, let's talk about poverty. If you want to talk about human trafficking, let's talk about human trafficking. And if you want to talk about people who are addicts or who have psychiatric, need psychiatric help, let's do that. But that has nothing to do with sex work, right? So the feminist party, or the feminist pirates of the Icelandic Pirate Party, have been quite vocal about this, and it's been such a difficult conversation because we have so many branches of feminism and anti-feminism within the party, that I've spent most of my time not doing what I enjoy, talking about sex work and how we can how that is detrimental to many other rights battles, but just holding a safer space for the conversation to happen. Yeah. I've had people that refused to call it sex work, that just sat there and were so mad, and they just kept spewing prostitution. It's prostitution. It's, it's selling of women's bodies. It's degrading to women. And so
the sad thing that these people are, these are people who actually might have some kind of a familiarity with the issue, or who care about it, and they still get stuck on that.
It's also because sexuality is so forbidden. It's still shameful to have a sexuality. Still shameful. I mean, even genitalia can be shameful. There must be 1,000 really good jokes about penises, right?
1 trillion. Like, I counted.
And then you have one joke about a vagina, and everyone's like, wow, that's disgusting. Why would you talk about a vagina? And so we have to normalize conversations about sexuality. We have to normalize conversations about I can want something, but it doesn't mean that I have to get it. Like, again, back to the consent part, but opening the safer space, whatever conversation that is extremely important. I mean, we've had very difficult conversations in Iceland, I think, not just around sex work, but also, people finding that certain policies of people in higher positions within the party are moving to the left or moving to the right, or not doing, like, if without conversation and without a safer space for everyone to participate in that safe conversation, we'll never get anywhere. I think that's important. And yeah, we can discuss, while we are arguing about why it's called patriarchy, why it's called feminism, why it's called white fragility, what critical race theory is, the baddies are winning.
No, but I think it's
conservative politics that's just going to throw us back to a time where, and I think, honestly, conversation, and particularly education, I'm not a nanny state person. I mean, and I say that growing up in Denmark, which I think, just like Sweden, has a nanny state sort of a vibe to it, if I may. I think you should be free and open to be an individual exactly the way you are, as freely from interference from the government as possible. And I want that done within a welfare state. I think we can do both. But while we still have systemic patriarchy, while we still have systemic policies that basically are trying to get people to police people, and we do that with CCTV, and we do that, with copyright laws that are, diminishing access to academic work. While we're doing all of these things, we're never going to have progress.
No. But it's so interesting to hear there, because I think that's and it's also like, because you've been going through a lot of it. I think it's illustrative also for someone who is a politician, right? I think what you're doing there is so important, because politics are like, in many ways leading with your heart, but talking policy. All right. I mean, okay, stop. Fine. I don't care what you call it. You can call basic income fucking neoliberalism, or you can call it socialism. I don't give a shit. It's a good idea. And talking about it, and maybe also applying it. If we're talking to liberals, I know they're going to be like that. I mean, fine. Let them own certain things, as long as you're actually making material profit for people. That is something that has to be viewed and appreciated. And also, the communication about what X means, it tends to come, like, I want to lift a little bit of a positive side of all of it, because we get a lot of let's just call them nationalists, right? Sverigevänner, as we call them here, Sverigesar. And I'm so happy at a certain extent that they're interested in politics. I mean, let's not forget that no matter for what reason, these people have actually become interested in politics. And a lot of people realize, particularly after Corona, I think, that even Sweden is corrupt. Because I think in Sweden, we haven't had that awakening that you probably had. And yes, we fought for things, but it was a long time ago. It was in the 60s, right? I mean, the last time we really protested stuff, I mean, really, you could say, I think it's even earlier. So we've kind of forgot that. And we've had unions who've taken care of everything for us, and it's been centrally planned. So you really have no unions left in Sweden, no real anarchistic unions. It's coming back, syndicalistic unions, and we're talking with them every Thursday for you who want to watch that.
Nice.
But getting that sort of activism back, and people uniting, solidarity from a grassroots level and up, and also doing what's needed to be done because you have power, right? Mm-hmm. That message.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I was about done.
Oh, but I think it's important just to go back to one of the questions from before. I mean, a current member of parliament, and it doesn't really matter who, is working very much with the feminist pirates to remove the ban on porn. So it's illegal to sell, distribute, or purchase pornography. Mm. So absolutely.
Can I ask?
Super antiquated, right?
Yeah, but is it being enforced?
Kind of wild, given like the internet has happened in the past few decades.
Yeah. It's the same thing like with copyright and a lot of the other things. It's just like, how are you even going to, like, even the European Parliament is failing, right? It's like, how are you even going to do that without like fascist fucking shutdowns of entire, like, no. But anyway, so it hasn't been, if I would open a store tomorrow and I would be producing and selling pornographic material there, yes, the police would come by and be like, hey, there's a law against this. We should probably have a conversation because I don't think this is allowed. However, what happened was COVID happened and a lot of sex work turned to OnlyFans. Maybe some of you have heard of that or have amazing profiles and hopefully are making a shit ton of money on OnlyFans. But someone filed a complaint or tried to get criminal charges against a Icelandic couple that was selling pornographic material or whatever you want to call it, that was selling services on OnlyFans. And I just, it's enough now. Like, no more nanny state. You get to use your body for what you want to use it for. If someone is forcing you to do that, then we should have laws protecting you. And, while we don't have that, sex workers don't have the same rights as any other worker in society. So take that, Marx. But honestly, it's a huge problem, and so we're currently working on a decriminalization. It's going to be hard for us. Iceland is really polarized into, political activism and other people, definitely the group that I identify with and share viewpoints with. And then there's other part that is quite, I guess, primarily Christian or Christian valued based, that, that perhaps is not ready for many of these things. I think we need to take some jumps in terms of jumping to legalization with some things, but I think with the pornography thing, it's a no-brainer just to do a quick pull request and then think about it later. And I was just thinking about what you said about you haven't fought for things in such a long time in Sweden. I mean, come on, pirates. We know it's not enough to just make the software. The maintenance is really where the putty and the gold is. The constant gardening and the maintenance of software will always be the most difficult part. And it's the absolute same thing with human rights. We're losing human rights because we were not carefully maintaining the rights that we had,
Yeah, that's the issue. Particularly, I guess, with Nordics, but in the so-called developed world as well. This complacency. There's this very deep-rooted idea in many, so-called developed countries that even if the exact same shit is going on under your nose or in your neighborhood or in your country that is going on in so-called third world countries, it somehow isn't the same, because bad shit or these whatever you associate bad shit with, that's something that doesn't happen here. It's we don't have that here. Luckily, we're so developed and we're best in the world in this and this. We don't have corruption. We don't have whatever. It's so thoroughly externalized. All these bad things happening to either far away physically or temporally. Nazis are something of the past. You can't be a Nazi if you didn't live in the 30s in the Germany of the 30s. So it's this complacency and this weird mental structure that people have that prevents them from seeing the issues.
Yeah, and I'm interested. I haven't heard anything from the chat in a while. Is everyone okay in the chat? Are you appalled by the madness
not everyone is okay in the chat.
No.
There has been a discussion which we are probably not going to
No, let's just ignore the chat for now.
By addressing it here.
Yeah, let the chat do the chat for now.
Yeah.
But I think it's important.
Chat, get yourselves together. We'd like to have some real questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very into questions. And yeah, trolling.
I don't think it's not trolling, actually. And I can say, this is one of the things that we do. We sit here on Twitch and Discord, and we obviously get a lot of people who are young, who just want to ask questions. So sometimes it's stupid to be snarky in the responses. I know that I'm doing that sometimes.
Tell them apart from the people who are just asking questions as a routine.
Yeah. But we have forgotten, and this is what you were talking a little bit, we have forgotten about basic things, and I can take this discussion as an example. It's a human it's a human right for handicapped people to have sex, so therefore prostitution should be, and you go
sex work, though. It's not prostitution.
Yeah, sorry. So therefore sex work should be legal, right?
Burn.
Yeah, but I mean, that argument is completely wrong. That's not the way you need to think about the question. You are, again, framing it in the way that someone else has the right to another person's body, and that's why they should. That's not how you think about this question. And I feel like so many of these things are fundamentally confused in how people also see these questions, and why the discussion about them gets so weird. Because again, if you're trying to promote it, you get, oh yeah, you're just one of those guys. And
it's I hate that, but I have colleagues, comrades, colleagues, co-conspirators, what you want to call it, within the Icelandic Pirate Party that have been very thankful that I've taken a quite vocal role in terms of support to sex work, because they've had a hard time. They're young, men in their 30s maybe, and they talk a lot about sex work, right? And so the internet's like,
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean though?
Awkward.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. I mean, we're all human, and we have to, we all come with different baggage, and I mean, whether we like it or not, the way that I look, my gender expression, whether I comb my hair or not, whatever it is, we do make impressions. And so sometimes I don't have to speak on behalf of myself and everyone else constantly. Sometimes it's actually nice to know, hey, you know what? Hang on, Otto is in a group that I'm also in that has to do with foreign policy, and perhaps it's better that Otto does that, because it comes back to nothing about us without us. And I've been very adamant about the sex work policies of the pirates having going through like the Red Umbrella in Iceland. They've been super helpful and amazing. There are also previous and current sex workers within the pirate movement that have had access to, and of course it's illegal, so you're not exactly going to step up and be like, hi, so I'm a sex worker, I will help you form this policy, because the police here have done razzias where they go through the classifieds, go through social media, go through OnlyFans, to shut down people, find them, throw them out of the country, etc., etc. But yeah, it's a difficult conversation, but I think we all know that if someone says something, where it comes from, and I guess where it comes from, not just in who you are, but also what part of you it comes from. We know that. We do have, many of us, if not all of us, a type of intuition. Are you for real? Like, do you want to have a conversation about, like, because I enjoyed the question before about this meme thing that had gone around, that somehow people have access to Icelandic women and their bodies, as a commodity, for the gene pool. It's believable if you are in that mindset. It's believable if you think that you have a privilege and access, and but once you kind of open it up, take the question seriously, and just peel it back a little bit, it's like, yeah, that would be weird though, wouldn't it? A country that pioneered women's rights and all this jazz, maybe not.
Like, I just want to defend myself here. I did not believe it, but it is a very well told lie.
It is.
And yeah, you've heard it as well. Then I just felt that Kingland.
Yeah, that's something I tried to ask you about. Like, where have you heard this? Since this was a new one for me.
This is like one of them schoolyard lies. That's just, it's been coming from so many different places. So I'm gonna source it to the internet.
I've seen it. I mean, there's been Icelandic news articles about this. Because and I think it's mean. I think it's mean because there's a bunch of people that were like, all right, I'll come help out. They look pretty hot. And of course they get absolutely slammed. Absolutely slammed. So yeah, no. Make other internet jokes, internet.
Yeah, and it's that's also another thing that we see often is like it's so pervasive what internet lies people buy. Like one that I'm following now, which I think it's not that serious, but it's kind of funny. It's an apparent Churchill wrote that said the next time the fascists will call themselves anti-fascists. Churchill quote. And you're like, I mean, you get. I mean, seriously, if you believe, like, it's hard to not say you're down some weird, and it's hard to fight. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see. And I kind of circle. We've been going on for 2 hours. So I mean, I can go on for a little bit longer. But tell us if you're getting tired or have to go somewhere. Right? Don't let us force you to stay. But I mean. Internet culture is really interesting in this way.
It's also like it's a very good example of like an internet meme or an internet thing or truism, since it's not even the Churchill quote, as far as I know.
No.
Like it's one of those like
No.
attribute just about anything to Gandhi.
Yeah,
See if people believe it.
but it's serious people that use them seriously. And I mean, in Sweden, it's even our politicians. I haven't heard that particular one, but I mean, we had our SD Jimmy Åkesson. I mean, the multiculturalism is the biggest threat towards Sweden. You know, so you're inventing an ism which is, you know, controlled by these smart people that the stupid sleeping Swedish politicians are following because they're not woke. You know, and you know, this is like, I don't know how much more fascistic. I mean, it's a modern day version of it, but it's pretty obvious. I mean, the type of rhetoric is pretty blatant, where you're having this invisible strong enemy, and this
critical thinking is you know, a pillar of any democratic society, and we've been lulled into to think differently. I mean, I think instead of viewing people as stupid, we need to figure out what is it that's missing in the fabric of society today that makes them want whatever quote to be true. You know.
Now, what would you say there? Like, just like generally. I mean, this is the $1 million question, essentially, right, for all of us.
It's a huge one, because it comes into so many different aspects of Swedish policy and Swedish politics. I think
global, I hope.
I think Sweden has done amazingly, particularly with the Syrian crisis. I think the way in which we treat human beings in general is terrifying, though. Just like third wave feminists try to save women that are doing sex work, women don't need to be saved. You know, women in sex work either need to be asked, is there anything we can do to help you, or just left alone to do whatever they want to do, right? And so I think the way in which Sweden has, I think, failed as a representative democracy to understand that the task at hand is not receiving refugees, it's understanding how, you know, mass integration happens. And Denmark did as well. I think the biggest part here is not just education. It's not enough to get there. It's sort of like, it reminds me of this whole like constitutional process in Iceland. Everyone thought it was enough just to make it. It's not. It's not even enough to pass it through parliament. That's literally the beginning. It's literally the beginning. The same thing, you know, yes, you have multilateral and bilateral collaborations and coordinations, and, you know, you're taking your percentage, your quota percentage of refugees. How terrible, you know, that sounds really terrible, but it doesn't end when you bring them to Sweden. It doesn't end in internment camps or other camps, whether that's with offense or without offense, or ghettoization. I think at the core, all of us, whether we're refugees, fascists, young men that, you know, don't have any security or stability in their lives to actually be able to ask questions and wonder about the world around them or themselves. You know, all we want to do is we want to feel, to a certain extent, useful. We want to feel like we're a part of something. I think that's super valuable to remember. And I think while someone is lucrating in resources, that's not always money, on dividing us, we need to keep that in mind, particularly in politics, as that's the main polarizer. Like, who is benefiting from the polarization? Because we all know that refugees don't happen for fun. It doesn't. You know, people don't take their children to drown in the Mediterranean Sea because you know, the jordgubbar in Sweden or the kräftor are delicious. I mean, they are. Don't get me wrong. Especially the strawberries are excellent. I also love the kräftor. But I mean, the eternal lie that we've been told that people would migrate like even using the word migrate to places only to suck at the tit of the government benefit system is insane. I can't believe we actually bought that, but we did. We did. And so the fear of the other lays very, very deep within us. And I think somehow it was easy in Sweden because there was already a policing system going. What's your neighbor doing? Who's doing that? You know, the whole policing culture, we need to be careful with that, I think. And I've seen that in COVID as well. You know, you have these anonymous lines where you can report on people that are not following quarantine. You can report on other citizens. I don't have to mention Orwell in 1984 to know that ultimately this is just not a way to go for any society. The minimum trust we need to have to each other, and of course also just an understanding. None of us, you know, we want to be a part of a collective, and as long as everyone around us is hating us, whether that's because we're anarchists, our skin is darker, whether it's because we are refugees, whether it's because we're women, non-binaries, whether it's because we are white young men that aren't performing within a hyper masculine stereotype in society, we will congregate around ourselves, right? We will push inwards instead of pushing outwards. And with that, we lose perspective. With that, we get homogenic. With that, we stop understanding why another person does what they do. And so the human interaction is in a diverse setting is absolutely crucial to happiness in any society, I think. Even with the racist old men in parliament that I argue with almost weekly. I know what they're afraid of. That's the thing. And they get really mad when I try to call it out. But I'm at the end. The lava fields around the volcano is where I grow my fox, and there's just none left. You know?
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, I really admire that because I know that it's really hard. Like I can feel, and we often feel that sometimes here. It's like, I mean, in Sweden, what people don't understand about Sweden, I think is important. Just a little bit of a background is we have been a pretty right wing. I mean, we've been privatizing almost everything that we've had, and we are a very corrupt country.
Sweden is like the mini USA. Like they're so far down the a neoliberalization and deregulation route compared to say Finland. Even it's this is also a recurring theme. It's wild. Like most people don't have up-to-date ideas of how things are going in Sweden. But I'd just like to draw attention to the fact that, I mean, it was 5 minutes ago, but we kind of crossed into the twilight zone where we are progressive. We are progressives. If I understood you correctly, Octavia, this is progressives discussing the failures of Sweden's immigration policy. That doesn't happen. You're not allowed to discuss that, as we know.
Yeah, everyone tells us we are not allowed to say this. Apparently, and we still do all the time.
You're not allowed to talk about these things, and the goody two shoes, the wokeists, don't talk about these things. So we just...
Yeah, I mean, I think you also have to be careful with that, because I understand, but wokeness is not going to save us. I think compassion is going to save us. I know it sounds terrible, and I feel like an old hippie when I say it, but it's not. That's at the end of it. And for those of you that are active in politics, whether your politics is queer liberation, the Pirate Party, copyright, whatever it is, transparency and governance, just remember, there are thousands of people that are exactly like you, that have the exact same passion. And it's not a marathon. It's a relay race, If you just spent 3 months campaigning for something, you just spent a lot of time trying to open up a conversation about the failures of immigration politics in Sweden, it's okay to hand the baton to the next person. It's also okay to open up spaces and hold them for as long as you can, to have that conversation and then close it back. You know, I think we sometimes think that we have to be these superhero activists and it's a marathon and we have to like in it for the long run, but it's not. It's a relay race. It's fine.
Yeah, I agree with everything you say, but I just found it funny since like this is, I'm not sure if it's as much of a thing in Iceland, but in Finland and Sweden, it's been like a huge refrain, like the one big refrain probably for at least like the first half of the past decade was that like you're not allowed, you don't get to say anything about these issues anymore. Like you're not allowed to discuss this, and nobody's discussing this, and we're being like super brave or just somehow exceptional by even broaching the topics. So it just it was a great note to not end up on, but like touch, since it's just such such a cliche, such a well-known cliche here.
And it doesn't have to be an attack every single time. You know, it like you don't always have to attack the policy. Sometimes it's just important just to keep your ground. And as I said, I think maybe 5 hours ago or whenever it was, it's you know who you are as a movement. You know who you are as an individual. You know why you're partaking in a movement, right? You know what it is that you want to change, because we don't partake in movements just to sit around and go, it's all right, isn't it? You know, we partake in movements because we're moved by something and because we want to move something, whether that's borders or, you know, whatever it is. We want some kind of change to happen. Just remember who you are. Stand by it. Oh, that's the fourth trick to, you know, if you want to get into the good side of an Icelander, stand by who you are. I have to admit.
And make occasional dad jokes.
Yes, it's very punny. Punniness is very important. Yes. Yeah.
But do it low key. Do not laugh at your own puns, not too loudly.
Well,
this is kind of
30 years ago. I find my own puns the most hilarious of everyone. I often am the only person laughing at my puns. I try to go in for a high five, and people just they just silent treat me. You do.
Yeah.
Kingdom has started laughing at me rather than with me.
Yeah.
But that's just yeah.
Yeah, that's just it. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, but you also leave a laughing pause. It's super awkward. Like, I don't know how to react. Like, I'm need to laugh now. I'm the only one you're talking to. We have an audience. It's really awkward if I don't laugh.
Yeah. And you
It's
love
okay
me,
to be awkward. Awkward silence is also amazing.
I just don't want this. Just gets awkward. We're just gonna have to laugh here.
Gotta stay in that awkward feeling. It's fine.
It's nice though. I like awkward feelings. They're the best.
When it's like feel it.
Yeah, you get immune to them.
Yeah, we're getting some really universal applicable advice here. Be yourself. Stay true to yourself.
No, because we veer off, pirates. Listen, it's the same in Iceland. We veer off. We know we're the outsiders. We know we're the odd ones out. We know we're the weirdos. We know we're the ones that come from the internet, not necessarily from that village we grew up in. And so it's really, really easy. Even though we're in our finest plateaued lop shoes, it's really easy to ruffle our feathers and we fall. What I'm saying is you're good at what you do. You're amazing. You're a pirate. You know that you want to build a better world. Stand by it. Because Lord knows the first one to stand up and say, no, you know, we need transparency and governance. Yes, copyright is an absolute shit show. We need to adapt to the world and the 21st century when it comes to, I will guarantee you, if you make the actual effort of doing it and looking behind you, there's a ton of us.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I think that's a pretty good, that's some good motivational speech. And I want to say, yeah, but it's really, I may add to that, 'cause I know we have some younger audience. If you don't know what you do or who you are, ask yourself who you want to be and be that person, right? I mean, it doesn't always have to be who you are. Like, you can also find some inspiration. Try to see something you hate a little bit less than everything else and do that. And
Need to change your mind.
yeah, because sometimes it's also about just making a goddamn decision. You know, like to a certain extent, it's like, I'll do this. I love it now. It might sound a little bit jaded, but it's a good way. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for coming. I'm not sure. Do you have some more questions, some addendums here? By the,
I think we need some more wisdom.
we need more.
I'm not sure. I think for now the wisdom is absolutely where it needs to be. Food for thought. Food for thought for you all. I think, remember there's always a bigger picture than the one that you see. Remember what it was like to be a teenager? It was fucking terrible. It was so difficult. Can you imagine being a teenager in this world? I only had to deal with Barsebek and things like that when I was a kid, and acid rain, right? Right now, I think the kids and the generations that are growing up now are dealing with a hell of a lot more than my generation had to. I saw, and was the generation that saw the wall of Berlin fall, right? They're seeing walls being put up. I think we have to be compassionate, and we have to just do one compassionate thing a day. And make it about politics, Everything is politics. The body you're born into is politics. Everything around you is made up of tiny little Lego bricks of politics. So just don't be silent. Don't think that anyone else is going to say it. Don't comply. Please, don't comply. I will guarantee you the path taken of non-compliance is the better path and more fun.
Yep, definitely more challenging at least. No, it's better. Do it. Really great. Good stuff. And when is your election? And do you have a little bit into the future by then, perhaps?
Yes. So our election is in September, the last Saturday it's the 25th. So we always have elections on Saturdays because it's a day off. So we usually have it in the spring because spring, hey, new things, good stuff. But this is the third time we're doing it in the fall. So end of September, please, everyone send good juju, good vibes.
Yeah, we will. We will follow up, obviously. Maybe by we can ask you to come by or someone from the party to comment a little bit on what happened after, and maybe a little bit more practical in that regard, or regards to that to the election, how it went, and what went good and bad, and so on. That would be super interesting because there's a lot of knowledge to be had, and sharing it is important for all of us, even for people who aren't perhaps organized politically yet. We will get you. So yeah, it'd be super interesting. We'll definitely follow up here too on how it goes. And there's also the Czech election coming up really soon, right?
Yeah.
It's such an interesting fall.
It is.
There's also Germany as well.
Oh, right. Yes.
Probably some others too. Like, it's either Slovenia or Slovakia where the pirates are also polling like above the threshold, but I think that was next year's election. A lot going on. We're going to have to work hard to get like people from all these countries where stuff is happening.
Yeah, but super good. Thank you so much for coming, Tavia, and
thank you so much for having me. Thank you and thanks to everyone for comments and questions. I think that's important.
Yeah, there was a lot of applauses,
some of the
happy
questions.
faces in the chat.
Yay!
Super.
Yeah, people love the speeches. We don't have many people making doing the inspiring speech thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm just all about that.
But that's good.
That's how we change. That's how we change policies in the end,
Yeah. I agree. I must do angry rants. That's my thing. What the hell is this? What are they doing?
We do not need more rants from this little furry raccoon. No. We are so tired of them rants. We're trying to get...
The chat loves it, right, chat?
We're not conducting.
Hearts in the chat for my rants. Oh, it's all good. Okay.
All right. Hej då Sverige. And
Hej.
goodbye everyone.
Hej då allihopa. Hej då chatten. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock.
I had to thought about it
Yeah.
every day.
7
so-
o'clock. Bye bye everyone.
Think
See you
about
next
it
week, hopefully.
every day.
PTV, oberoende, piratistisk media, skapad och finansierad av tittarna.